This is Wheel Bearings. I'm Dan Roth from Forbes.
I'm Sam Abuel-Samad from Navigant Research.
And I'm Rebecca Lindland from Rebecca Drives.
So welcome back from CES, you two. I watched from afar, and it looks like it was a huge show and lots and lots of stuff to cover. Are you recovered?
I managed to come back without contracting any new diseases, so I think I'm in pretty good shape.
Yeah, that's good. It's been making the rounds.
Yep, I had the disease prior to CES in the form of a very bad cold. So hopefully I didn't spread germs. And the blister on my foot is almost healed. So I got that going for me.
Excellent.
That's good. You mean you didn't go and like lick door handles and stuff? And like, oh, this is a really nice iPod for me to cough all over.
Only in the privacy of my own room.
Fantastic. All right, let's first talk about the cars that we had that got us maybe to and from the airport or whatever. But Rebecca, you've been driving the I was going to say 2019 something, but no, it's the 2020 Toyota Corolla XSE, the sporty one.
It is. So they dropped this off right around the same time that I swapped out the Ram 1500 pickup truck for the Corolla. And of course it was, quite the dramatic change, but I was excited to drive this because I hadn't had a chance before. And this is the one that I had is the XSE, and it's got the 2.0 liter 4-cylinder 16 valve with the CVT. It's got the sport suspension, sport drive mode. I can't say that I noticed a significant difference in the sport drive mode, and that seems to be kind of a running theme lately.
It does make a little more noise.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's I should say I didn't notice anything positive, particularly positive about it. So this one has the sport version, has these low profile, high performance tires, and they were just incredibly noisy. And of course, the CVT transmission was also rather noisy as well. And so that was a little frustrating because it definitely compromised the experience of driving this vehicle. So this one has a starting price of $25,450, and then it has the premium audio with dynamic navigation, and that was $1,750, 1715 as an option. And then it had adaptive front lighting system, which is always helpful, for $450. And then I had a couple of other paint protection, carpet mat, $930 destination fee for a whopping total of $29,189.
Does that seem expensive for a Corolla to you?
I felt like it was expensive.
I'm not challenging. It seems kind of pricey. It is their top trim, I suppose. In some way.
And it was, it was well equipped. It had heated front seats. It had, a nice large screen. It had a lot of nice amenities to it. It had wireless charging that actually fit my phone. It had some really nice things to it. Blind spot monitoring, push button start. But wow. And, as we've repeatedly said now, we give Mazda a hard time about their pricing. But I definitely prefer the Mazda 3 to the Corolla in terms of that premium experience. I mean, the Mazda has that beautiful interior, that really nice dash. And, I definitely have been vocal about the pricing on some of the Mazda products. But when you compare it to the Corolla, I really felt like the Mazda was a better experience.
I will agree there. The Corolla, as good as it is, and it's pretty good to drive. So I'd be curious how driving them back to back, how much better or better at all the XSE is versus the regular Corolla, because it's a good driving car, but the interior is just not. It's not Mazda 3 good.
Yeah, and as I said, I haven't driven a lower trim line, but I do remember very distinctly talking about the Mazda 3 and really feeling like I was in a premium vehicle. I mean, I'm not talking like BMW 3 Series or something, but I'm talking about just feeling like I was getting a lot of value and a lot of creature comforts, a lot of the premium experience within the car was significant in that Mazda 3. And while the Corolla was very, very good, it's certainly a long way away from the Econoboxes of the past. So I don't want to dismiss that. It's a very, very good vehicle. And, the experience overall was very, very good. It's just that, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting old. Those price points they just seem, I feel like when you start to get into that $30,000 range, first of all, there's so much available in that range within the marketplace that has more utility. And yes, I'm thinking about a crossover, but I'm even thinking of something like the Hyundai Kona, or I haven't driven the Hyundai Venue yet, but, something that is still kind of a car, but just has a little bit more room, just has a little bit more presence on the road rather than a compact car like this is.
Well, to defend the Corolla a little bit, and I have driven the Venue, and the Venue, like some of the other recent, subcompact utilities that have come to market, what we're seeing is a kind of a bifurcation in the small utility market between the really value-oriented models like the Nissan Kicks and the Venue, and then slightly nicer ones like the CX-30, and well, actually that one's a lot nicer. But at any rate, those value models that are coming in with starting prices, in the $18,000 to $19,000 price range, there's a distinct difference there. With they have typically the hard plastics and everything, and I haven't driven the base Corolla. I have driven the same XSE you drove, Rebecca. And, I found that, its driving dynamics are so much better than any Corolla of the past. And I think visually it actually does have, especially in the XSE trim, it actually does have a pretty good presence to it. And it has some things about it that I really liked. Like, for example, the belt line, when you look at it from the side, the belt line kind of sweeps down towards the front. And, in that front part of the door, base of the A-pillar area, that's kind of where it bottoms out there. And it actually helps. I found it helped a lot with visibility. Really opened up, got rid of some of the blind spots that we've traditionally had, in that area, especially as they've moved away from, the pillar mounted mirrors, to getting the side mirrors mounted on the doors. That kind of opens up that corner right at the base of the A-pillar.
Yeah, absolutely. The visibility was very good in it, particularly at that A-pillar point, which, of course, for me, because I sit so close, often will intrude on my line of sight. So that was very good. I don't mean to trash it. I don't mean by any stretch. I mean, it's a very, very good car. It's just that there's so much competition out there in that price point.
Yeah, I agree that $30,000 for a Corolla or any car in that class is really starting to push it. You are solidly into C segment territory if the size is something you want, but sometimes the size isn't what people want. I think we've seen people who are willing to pay more for a smaller car because bigger isn't always better. And, the XSE is the top of the range. It's the highest. I think it has the highest list price at $25,500. I drove the XLE, I think, a while back, and I was still impressed with the way it drove. I really liked the direct steering. It felt really, really way more sort of sharp and willing to turn than I had ever experienced in a Corolla. That the Corolla has always been kind of dull, sort of numb. Definitely a good car, but not real good to drive if you enjoy driving. It's right. That's not its mission. So I was really surprised.
It's always been an appliance.
Right. And I was really surprised at how actually it's real pleasant to drive. The CVT aside, I do think that sort of hurts it in that sense, because you get that motorboating sensation. But the way it goes down the road is pretty pleasing. It has good space, a good trunk. I still don't love the tech.
I don't like the
Entune is pretty mediocre by modern standards.
It's pretty brutal. The other thing too, I was disappointed in was there really wasn't a lot of storage space within that center console. There's the cubby hole is very, very small. There's 2 small cup holders. It was pretty marginal from a storage standpoint, from an interior storage standpoint also. But again, you're absolutely right, Dan. There are people that this is the perfect size of vehicle for. 34 miles per gallon was fantastic, which is good, just about what I got. That I was very close to getting that as well. And, there's a lot of really good things about it. I think if it was even 27,000 or 26,000, I would be a little bit more enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, I can see that. And I do think too, even if, as we say, this is a right size for some people, even at that size, there's a ton of competition, which makes it hard necessarily to choose. Because even as it's the nicest, sort of most refined Corolla ever, it's still a Corolla. It's still got some of those lower grade materials you can see in the interior that some other brands don't. And just, I did like the stuff they charge you extra for. I liked the adaptive headlights.
Sure.
I thought they were actually really good. And being able to see at night is a huge plus.
That's a positive.
And they all have the Toyota safety sense, the safety suite of stuff standard,
yes.
Which I think in this class of car where you're going to get beginners all the way up to sort of like value seeking older folks. I think that's a key feature to make standard is they're not charging you extra to give you the safety tech. And I like that.
Absolutely. I mean, again, there's a lot of good things about this vehicle. And if you're looking for that compact car, this is definitely, it's a Toyota Corolla. So you're going to get the durability and reliability that one expects. But I would encourage our listeners to shop around as well, because of course we haven't even mentioned the Honda Civic, which I love.
I agree there.
And competes directly with this. And I just think there's the driving experience, the dynamics of the Honda Civic, I just don't think can really be beat in this class. It's just so much fun.
And, in Toyota's defense, the XSE does start at, with delivery about 26.5. So, you're looking at about $3,000 worth of options that were on that car. And,
right.
even the starting point of the XSE, it's pretty well equipped. And, Toyota does put their ADAS package standard across the board, even on the base L model, which starts, at $20,000. So there is a lot available, and there are more affordable variants of the Corolla available. Toyota has their Safety Sense 2 package on here, on every variant of the Corolla, just as they do on all of their other mainstream models now. While the XSE is, especially the way it was equipped, the way that Rebecca drove it and the one that I drove a few months ago, it's getting, fairly pricey for, what is a mainstream compact car. Although, compact today, is more like midsize was 10, 15 years ago. I mean, this is the size of what a Camry was, 15 years ago. So you're getting a lot more car for your money as well.
Yeah. And you are certainly. And again, if you're coming out of an 11-year-old car, this is going to be an absolute delight.
That's true. I do wish that they offered do they offer the XSE with the manual? I don't think they do. I think the only one you can get with the manual is like the L or the S or whatever.
I believe the L, maybe the LE are the only ones. But they, there's, and for those that are looking for maximum fuel economy, there's also a hybrid now, Corolla hybrid, which has the same styling and everything, all the other good things about it, and it gets 53 miles per gallon. Yeah.
And that's sort of like,
that starts at $23,000.
That's taking the wind out of the Prius sales.
Oh yeah.
And I think that was always the intent. We saw a bunch of stories not too long ago, like last week or so, about that actual thing. Like Prius sales are way down, but Toyota hybrid sales across the board are actually up because they have moved the tech into their sort of normal models.
Hybrid is going mainstream now.
Yeah. And that was always what the Prius was intended to do, was to sort of soften up the market for it. And then it was always intended to go away. So,
although for a while there, for Toyota, really seemed to want to make, Prius, its own sub brand. They really wanted to expand on Prius, in the early part of this decade or the early part of the last decade, when it, they couldn't build enough Priuses. They introduced the Prius V and the Prius C. And, I think they wanted to see how far they could stretch that Prius brand. And now, all of those except for the standard Prius are gone. And even the standard Prius is fading fast.
Yeah. I think it was a critical miscalculation of the equity in the Prius brand at a time when younger buyers, millennials who don't have that same kind of feel. I mean, Prius and Boomer are practically synonymous, but others don't feel like that. And so I think that if they had expanded the Prius lineup 10 years ago, I think they would have been in a much better shape than when they did it.
Well, I was a little confused by how they did it too. The Prius always had that sort of interesting look. I say interesting kindly.
Interesting is so nice. That was very kind of you.
But then,
it was very
Prius
much about virtue signaling.
Yes, and the Prius V though, like the larger one, sort of looked like it belonged, but the Prius C, which was my favorite Prius, by the way, it looked like a tiny Toyota hatch. It didn't have that familiar look. So it was almost like
basically a Yaris hybrid.
Yeah, it was a bunch of products, and they just stuck a name. They took what they had, stuck the powertrain in it, stuck a name on it, and threw it on the market. It was maybe it was a cynical move. I don't know. I'm pleased to see that it's sort of the tech has moved over into the regular models, because it's good. It's good to drive now. It kind of doesn't matter. There was all kinds of there was quite a hue and cry about hybrids before, but a hybrid Corolla, man, that seems like a really good idea to me. And the car itself is pretty good. So
I agree.
The Corolla itself is a sub brand, and not in ways, but in reality, you've got a lot of choice there. So it sounds like the XSE is the one to avoid.
Well, just from a price, and also from the tires did the experience no favors, because it really added a lot of road noise without adding a lot of anything else.
Yeah, and so it didn't feel sporty to you at all.
The 8-inch wheels look good.
I didn't have something to compare it to, and it was fun to drive. It did feel sporty. When I put it in sport mode, that didn't seem to help anything except make it louder.
Yeah.
But so I guess, the sport, it's fun. But I would have rather had a quieter experience.
Okay. I can agree there. Yeah. The Corolla itself, like all Corollas now feel pretty good. They feel like they were driven by somebody who likes to drive cars when they were tuning them. So that's good. Like
it does. And there is a 6-speed manual available on the SE, and I think that would be all sorts of fun.
Yeah. Well, I'd have to drive it.
Well, yeah, you have to drive it. I mean, I'm always leaning towards a manual. So
even a bad manual, though, sometimes bad manual versus CVT, I'd probably pick bad manual.
Yeah. I'd rather have bad manual.
I've had a brief drive in the Corolla hatchback with their 6-speed. It's not a great 6-speed, but you're right. I would take that over a CVT any day.
Well, I have one more thing, I think, to say, one more observation here. And that is, so the XSE starts around $26,000 and yours was priced up at $30,000. And you know what you can get for $30,000 if you buy carefully and you want something that's kind of sporty? A VW GTI.
What? Oh, fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, that's no contest.
Or a Civic Si.
Again, no contest.
No contest. Yeah, exactly.
And it's the same as it ever was, though. Corolla, even when they say they're sporty, they're not terribly sporty. They're good. It's a good car. Just, it's not those cars. It's not what it aspires to be. So let's just move on. Sam, you are luxuriously ensconced in the 2019 Genesis G80 Sport.
I was briefly ensconced in it for just a few days before heading out to Vegas for CES. It's now gone and has been replaced in the driveway by the Lincoln Aviator Grand Touring, but we'll talk about that one next time. Yes, it does have low profile tires because it's the Sport with all-wheel drive and the 3.3 liter twin turbo V6.
That's such a good engine.
Which it is a lovely engine. Genesis 8-speed automatic transmission. This was a very well equipped car with lots of stuff in there, including a full suite of ADAS. And one of the things that separates Genesis from the Hyundai and Kia brands is that per my preference, it has a central control knob for the infotainment system, which I continue to insist is the better approach than touchscreens, and I will do so till my dying day. But no, we've talked about the G80 on several occasions before. Driven it previously in a couple of different variants, including the Sport, and it is really one of the most underrated mid-size, to larger luxury sedans on the market. I think that, Hyundai deserves, or Genesis, I should say, Hyundai Motor Group deserves a lot of credit, for what they've done with this car. It's a really handsome design, and, it's one of these fastback sedans, but, because it's a rear wheel drive platform, it's got that, that nice longer dash to axle ratio, shorter overhang in the front, so when you look at it in profile, it's got that sportier look because they push the front axle forward more. The rear seat is plenty roomy. It's not quite as cavernous as the G90 that you were driving, Rebecca, but it's still more than adequate. And in the Sport trim, it's got these darker gray wheels. The grille is kind of combination of black chrome and black mesh grille, and it's just I think it's a great looking car and a great driving car, and I really enjoyed it for the few days I was in it again.
I remember I drove that in Korea before it came to the States, and it was really good. It was really, really good. I mean, I think it's the best of the trio that they have out right now.
Yeah,
in terms of sportiness and engagement, and it was a blast.
I think in terms of raw sportiness, if that's what you're looking for, in a Genesis, I would say the G70 is probably it because it's smaller and lighter.
I'm sorry, you're in the 80.
Yeah, this is the 80.
Sorry, the 80 is in the middle of the three. The G70 is definitely the best.
Yeah,
and the G80, but the G80 is better than the G90 for sportiness, but that's not what the G90 is intended for.
Right. Yeah, the G90 is more the pure luxury model. The G80 is kind of a really nice balance between the two. It's big, but it's not enormous. Like the G90, and it's got a good sized trunk and everything. So I think it's a really nice balance. And if you're looking for something, as an alternative to, say, a 5 Series or, an Audi A6 or a Mercedes E-Class, in typical Genesis fashion, this gives you, pretty much everything you're going to get on one of those, great looks and, great driving dynamics and at a much more reasonable price. This one, is pretty much loaded up. And, with delivery, it came, to $58,745, so less than $59,000, all in, aside from tax. And, you've got, adaptive cruise control with full stop and go capability, a really nice big heads up display, really comfortable seats, and really nice materials inside. I think it's just really well executed all around. And I think it's a great sedan if that's what you're looking for. Unfortunately, less and less of the market is looking for a sedan like this, right, especially in the U.S. So, the next new product we're going to see from Genesis is the GV80, which they have recently started releasing some images of, some teaser sketches of, and I think we're probably going to see that in New York in April at the New York Auto Show.
Yeah. I think that, what's cool about the G80 though is that it's that vehicle that if you want a luxurious but sporty experience on your commute, I think it delivers in that regard. As you say, like it's just that really nice balance between a luxurious car, and yet if you want it to be sporty, you can push it and it will happily respond. And I love that combination because, when you're going out with your family or something, maybe you don't want to have a really aggressive drive and you don't have to have it aggressive. But if you're by yourself or with one other person and you're going to the office or something and you want a little excitement, you want to spice up your commute, I think it's a great vehicle for that.
No, totally agree. And, it's got not exceptional, but decent fuel economy. I got about 21 miles per gallon with it, which for, sedan with this kind of performance and this size is reasonable, not exceptional.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah.
But it's not great in today's world.
Well, I mean, It's got, what is it? That's 370 something horsepower, 360 something horsepower from that twin turbo V6. So it's got a lot of mouths to feed there.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it, Dan.
That's why I said, given the performance level, it's very reasonable. So if what you're looking for is, significantly better fuel economy, you'll probably want to wait around, at least from Genesis until they start rolling out some electrified models in the next year or so.
Yeah.
And they're coming. Just everybody's doing it. So, and yeah, I find it hard not to love the Genesis lineup. I think that they've done a really good job at translating what was great about the brands we all know and love. Maybe 15 or 20 years ago, the things that made us love those brands, the G70 is tidy, it drives tidy, and it just has that sort of performance DNA in it. And the G80 is that sort of mid-level where it does what you say it does. It has that sort of dichotomy. It can be that regal, long wheelbase kind of luxury car, or it can mix it up still. And I can't wait to try out the G90. I haven't had a chance to do it, to get one in the driveway, but man, does that car look good.
It does.
Even the big
Go ahead,
grill.
Sam.
I like even the big grill.
I don't mind the big grill, shockingly, but the thing with the G90, as I talked about before, is you never forget that you're in a big car, as opposed to the G80, where I think you can.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah.
The G90 it's always big and it always drives big, and it always reminds you, really around every curve that you're in a big ass luxury sedan. And, I mean, I think I don't know. If you can fit your life into the G80, I think that's arguably preferable. But the styling, though, I will say the G90 styling is beautiful. I love the simplicity of the back. I like the fact that they're finally spelling out the word Genesis as opposed to just having a badge that could be any number of enviable, marks. But I think that it's important that they establish the brand, because I don't think they've really done that very well quite yet.
No, I agree.
Yeah, although it's been a process.
I think one thing I like about both the G80 and the G90, maybe slightly less so with the G70, because it's got the fender vents and everything, is, it's a modern, but, not over designed car, and from what we've seen of the, the sketches that they've released of the GV80, I think it follows that same theme, of keeping it, fairly restrained, so there's, it's got its own design language, but it's not overdone.
Yeah, well, I think that Luke, and I can never say his last name, so I'm going to cruise. What is it? Donkervolk?
Yeah.
So Luke Donkervolk, I think that he came from Bentley, Lambo, Audi. I think that he does have that lovely restraint in his designs where, I often equate it to like when they deal with when they're working on the clay model, just go over it one more time and just skim it back a little bit, and just that restraint, that just understated. I think he does that really, really well. And we're starting to see his designs and his influence on those designs, of course, along with Peter Schreier. But I think that there's really good stuff that's going to be coming out of Genesis.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree. I can't wait for their SUVs and crossovers to land, which is a weird thing to say. Super weird thing to say. But that's a good pivot for us. So I've been driving the 2020 Ram Rebel EcoDiesel.
Love it.
It's a lovely truck. It's a lot of truck. I haven't built this one online, but it starts around $60,000. It has a lot of the features that we've talked about in the past. It has that split tailgate, which is pretty simple. It's like elegant in its simplicity. It's not quite the Swiss Army knife that the GMC Multi-Pro tailgate is, but this is a good way to get some more functions out of a pretty simple design. So I liked that. We actually took it skiing, and so I just had that. It was, it could open it up like a door. You just toss all the crap in the bed and just slam it shut. So that's nice. It's super comfortable inside because Ram does the best interiors. And the detailing is really impressive. There's two different colors for the stitching. The Rebel has its own color palette. So it's red and white stitching, and then there's red interior trim materials. So it looks really good. It presents really well. It's very comfortable seating. It's quiet going down the road. And the Rebel itself has that sort of extra sort of aggression in its appearance. Some of the blacked out trim and the white letter tires and the Rebel graphics and stuff. I'm not sure if it has increased ride height. It might.
It does. It's got the off-road tuning.
Yeah.
How are the tires on like the highway?
You don't have any incentive to go faster than about 70 miles an hour. Like,
So
you
they're
follow
loud?
traffic. They're not. They're a little loud, but it's not particularly loud inside. It's very, very
Interesting.
sort of well damped in the noise department. The tires are they're those sort of more off-road knobbier tires, so they're not really happy about getting pushed too fast. They get squishy, and you're fine with that because it's just a comfortable place to be, rolling along, listen to the radio. The most interesting thing to me was the 3-liter EcoDiesel V6, which
how was that?
It's okay. I don't get the point. I mean, I get the point that it's got like 480 pound-feet of torque. But it seems really out of place in the Rebel just because of its power delivery. It's really soft off the line. And then it certainly has good torque. It's very well behaved. It starts right up when it's cold. It's pretty quiet. It's still got a little of that diesel clatter. I think they let some of that through, so that you can hear what you've bought. It matches really well with the transmission. It's a very well behaved powertrain. I wanted a little bit more off the line torque that maybe I'm just trained to like.
Wow. But that's what diesel's known for.
Yeah, it needs to get up it needs to get some head pressure up. It needs to get the boost going before it really starts to put its shoulder to the work. And maybe that's by design so that it doesn't tear up the transmission or spin the tires or something. It's really easy to modulate the torque. So that's, I think, probably good. I also don't know how great this particular truck would be at towing because of the way it does have the air suspension, so you can put it in tow mode or whatever, and it'll settle down a bit. But I'm just not sure that this is the right truck to be putting that torque to work. But I don't tow a lot, so I don't have that expertise.
I would expect that off the line softness that you're feeling now probably has something to do with recalibrating it, to really try not to cheat on emissions. Because one of the places, one of the times when you're getting the most emissions from an engine, is during that initial acceleration. So my guess is that they've really dialed things back, in that initial acceleration, to minimize the particulates and minimize the NOx production in that region, because that's where they're most likely to have issues with that. And,
Yeah.
FCA, has, they recently settled with EPA, on violating emission standards with the previous generation of this engine. So that would be my guess what's happening there. As far as, why you would want this particular engine, my guess is that, as with Ford and with GM, this really is aimed at the towing market, and it may not have the, in the form of a 3-liter 6-cylinder, it may not have the ultimate towing capability that the big V8s would have, in terms of the peak. But where the diesels really have an advantage is in fuel economy when you are actually under load towing. And if you tow a lot, if you only tow a couple of times a year, like towing your boat, from your driveway to the lake in the spring, and then hauling it out of the lake in the fall and putting it back in storage, well, even, having, in that case, if that's the only time you tow, and you don't really need a truck at other times, borrow one or rent one. But, even if you do need to own a truck, having a gas engine, may be a better option for you in those cases. But if you're towing all the time, like, for example, if you got a horse trailer and you're towing it to horse race, horse shows all the time, or, you're a landscaper, that's, towing a bunch of equipment, things like that, on a daily basis, then the difference in operating costs with the diesel versus a gas engine are going to be huge. And so that's where it makes sense to have the diesel, for the average driver of one of these trucks, that, if you don't have that kind of use case, it probably doesn't make as much sense to spend that $5,000 on the diesel engine. Yeah,
I can see that. And the fuel economy is great. It's getting 21 miles to the gallon, 21, 22, which I was pretty impressed by. Although I have yet to go put fuel in it, which may be less impressive, given the cost, because diesel is, a bit more expensive, than just the regular grade of fuel you'd be able to get away with in a gas engine. So it's a really nice truck. I like it quite a bit. And the Ram, I think, deserves its position. It keeps climbing in sales, and they've earned it. I think it's a really well executed pickup. The one big glaring issue is the infotainment. It's got this giant screen, and I can't figure out how to do a damn thing anymore. I just sat there and stared at it the other day, trying to figure out how do I just enter a destination with the nav? And there's some way where you can make the whole screen the map, but it doesn't. There's not a button for it that's obvious. And the processor is slow, so I'm trying to enter the name of my destination so it can search for it, and it's lagging when I'm trying to enter the. Did you try voice? I tried a little bit, and it got confused there too. I don't know what happened with Uconnect, because Uconnect has been so good for so long. It's been easy to use. This is not easy to use, and it's glossy, and it's just crappy.
My brother had similar issues. I mean, I asked him directly. I said, "How long did it take you to get used to it?" He said it was a few hours. Was what he said.
How long did he sit there and look at it, trying to figure out how do I just change from the radio to some other source?
Yeah, that was definitely initially a challenge, but then I do think that he kind of got used to it a little bit. I know. I feel like I don't know. I think I wasn't bad with it. But then again, I can break anything that you need technology wise. And so if I was able to figure it out, that means that most people probably can't, is what I have found, because I think very differently, or I use this stuff very differently. So I don't know. I think it's a known challenge though.
Yeah, it was a bit of a shock, because again, the Chrysler has for so long had Uconnect has been really, really friendly, and this was not anywhere near as friendly. It seems like a real, I don't want to say it's dangerous, but it makes you think too much. And maybe anytime with more than a week in the car, it would become a non-issue, but it's anytime you're distracted by
that's a problem right there, right? I mean, that's the thing, is that it can't be a distraction. It needs to be something that's intuitive.
Yeah, and it's not intuitive enough
Yeah.
for my taste. But I think that's one of those things that there's always that friction between what those of us who have the car for a short time and to evaluate it are going to say, and then those who own it. And there may be some things that after you spend some time with it, you actually really appreciate. I have found that I don't appreciate this off the bat. So I'll need to spend more time with it, and maybe we'll circle back next week.
Well, fortunately, you have the option of saving yourself $3,000 and just, not getting the Rebel 12 package, that package that includes the 12-inch Uconnect system. And you can get just the regular 8.4-inch, the one you're used to, which, as you say, I think does work better, and it retains physical controls for the climate control. Because one of the issues,
physical controls for climate control too. They're hidden. They're off on the side of the screen, and it's got a mode button that will cycle through, and it's got temperature.
Yeah, but you still have to touch some stuff on the screen. I prefer the base setup, the 8.5-inch setup that just has 3 big knobs, at the for the temperature and the fan and the mode, and I think that system works a lot better. And then you have the previous Uconnect 4 system, that has that nice, clean, easy to use interface that's responsive, and I think generally works a lot better. Unfortunately, I think we're going to be seeing more of this stuff. These big screens, I just got an email that came the other day from Mark Truby, head of communications at Ford, that sent out to everybody in media, with some of the highlights of what's coming up in 2020 for them. And among those things is, all new F-150 that's going to be coming later this year. And I have little doubt that one of the options in there is going to be that same 15-inch Sync 4 system that we saw in the Mustang Mach-E, which is the only system that's available there. At least from an interface standpoint, I think that one actually works a little better than the 12-inch Uconnect. And it does have a big volume knob on the bottom of the screen, so that helps as well.
Yeah, so I don't want to sound like I'm opposed to the large screens. I have my issues with having a large screen in the cabin just because of light pollution, but that seems like when you pick the right screen, that can be mitigated. The issue I really have is, like, does it pass the can you operate this thing without looking at it test? And that's important for secondary controls, maybe less so for the audio system other than volume and tuning. But for HVAC, I feel like that's actually an important thing. You should be able to just reach out and grab those and just know where they are with muscle memory.
I totally agree.
So I have to stare at the screen and figure out what to poke. And we've said this constantly, so I don't want to belabor the point, but
no, let's belabor the point until they stop doing this stuff.
They're not going to stop doing it.
It's bad user experience.
It's terrible.
And manufacturers shouldn't be doing it.
Especially with an aging population, I feel like you really need your human factors people to put on the old suit and sit in the car and try to use the damn thing. And I'm sure they do to a certain point, but I don't get how you would release something like this. And it's not just FCA. We've talked about it with Census. Even Sync took a while to get better. I mean, even iDrive, it's refined now, but it's still like it's a very deep system, and the way everything integrates with your phone now, especially with BMW, is like the car is an extension of your phone in a sense, and that really makes all the personalization possible, which takes a lot of the work out of it. But that's really, really hard for us to evaluate because we're not getting that ownership experience where the car really becomes a lifestyle device. So I think some of our complaints are mitigated by the actual ownership experience, but I think others of them are just like, it's just bad design overall. And please fix it before I crash your stuff. I don't, because I'm trying to figure out how to do something. The Ram overall, other than that, like it's a lovely large truck. I like it. It looks tough. It's great on the road. It's
great off road too.
I mean,
I've driven the Rebel off road, and it is very capable.
Yeah, it has like I think locking functions on the 4-wheel drive system and stuff like. It's just this is a solid truck. Complaints about the UI aside, it's a solid truck, and I think they deserve to be making the gains they're making because it's just I'm impressed. We just spent 10 minutes complaining about big screens. You guys were at CES, which is, I'm sure there's no shortage of big screen. I never understood the big screen thing. Like when big screen TVs were a thing, it's like, I don't know. Back when it was standard def, it's like, you guys know there's only 525 vertical lines, right? Like the larger your screen, the more you're going to see the lines. But now that we have high def, I still like, I don't know. I'm not as impressed by a large TV screen as I guess the common man. It doesn't really do anything for me. I'm just like, okay, whatever. It's a big TV. Moving on. But now that I've finished my editorial, what did you guys see at CES that really stood out? That was impressive. We have a few things on our list. Why don't we just pick one and go?
You want to go first, Rebecca? Yeah, I think you had the most interesting ride of either of us.
Oh, well, yes. I mean, I definitely hit a bucket list item very unexpectedly. And thanks to Sam, because he sent on the invitation to me. I got to ride in the Goodyear blimp.
That's old tech. It
was insane. Well, actually, it was their most recent version. It was built in 2018, but I do love the fact that Zeppelin built it.
Oh, did it really?
Yeah, I believe it actually is technically a Zeppelin now. You know, the difference between a blimp and a blimp has no structure to support the balloon, yes, and a Zeppelin does have a structure.
Isn't that
always the engineer? Always the engineer. It is near to being a dirigible.
Well, a dirigible is the generic term that covers all of those types of airships. So both blimps and Zeppelins are dirigibles. But then a Zeppelin specifically has a structure that supports the balloon.
And this does have that. It was I'll post some things on Twitter. I haven't done that yet. I'll post it on our feed. I think that probably there was a couple things that were very surprising. First of all, it is a brand new Zeppelin, and it does have an aluminum structure around it. There were so many surprises because I was just like, I didn't know what I was going to get into. It comfortably seats 10 people, and it has it was incredibly quiet, but it had windows open, which was so much fun to be able to have windows. Like you're not used to, when you're obviously in an aircraft, it's usually all enclosed. We could not go any higher than about 2,500 feet. What they told us was that they typically try and keep it at around 3,000 to 3,300 or below, because then the helium starts expanding, and that's sub-op, obviously.
When you go higher than that, the helium expands?
Right. The helium starts expanding and starts mixing, and that's a bad thing. So a couple of things that were pretty significant improvements with this airship is it does have two wheels. So it has a fore and aft. And so when they land or when you take off, particularly when you land, you don't have to do that steep decline anymore to grab the single unicycle wheel at the front of the vehicle. You can now land it more horizontally, which of course is much more comfortable, but also in my mind, a little bit safer too. That was a really cool thing because people had told me, they're like, oh my gosh, wait till you take off. It's super scary. But it wasn't. Actually, it was very much of just
float up,
a horizontal and a vertical lift in a horizontal position. The other fun thing, and I don't know how they do this at the very beginning of the day, but as they were moving people back and forth, it was 2 people on, 2 people off, very Noah Ark-esque. But because the balloon will rise up if there's not enough weight in there. And so I believe at the beginning of the day, they hold it all down. Everybody, and there's just it's ropes. I mean, it's almost this super low tech control mechanism. And they load up the airship, and then throughout the day, they make sure that there's the same amount of weight so it doesn't float away. So that was kind of fun. And then when you're up there, it's so quiet. And, again, like it's just such a different experience. It was so cool. I mean, people have compared it to a hot air balloon, which I've never been in, but it was just lovely. It was like, I just kind of felt like I could be up there all day long. And there is a bathroom on board, which was kind of fun. It's just like a typical airplane bathroom. But again, these kinds of luxuries that did not exist in other times. The cockpit was quite small, open to the cabin so you could see it, but it was pretty narrow. It was pretty small, pilot and co-pilot, joystick control. And, so there's things that were definitely taken from aviation. So Goodyear, our host, they try and have 13 pilots at all times. Right now, they're down to 11 airship pilots. They typically travel in a crew of about 30, though. So it's a pretty big effort to bring the airship to different places. Most of the people that have come from the military, or some other training, our pilot actually, there was actually 2 women pilots of those 11. 2 of them are women. One did come from the military. The other one, actually, Ariya, she actually has never flown in the military. She had started, got her aviation license, and then she actually decided to try flying airships instead and never went back, which was really kind of cool. So she's been doing it for like 15 years or 18 years or something. It was crazy. And, for the most part, most of the people have been doing this for quite some time. And, it's just really, really cool. It was an absolutely fantastic experience.
So did they have it there just to promote some other, like for some other reason? Or is it just, it's cool tech on its own that Goodyear wanted to show off?
I think it's a little bit of just cool tech on its own. I mean, Sam, did you have a backstory on it?
Not on why the blimp was there. I think Goodyear was at the show this year. I actually did have a chance to meet their CTO on Monday evening.
Oh, nice. That's right.
And we talked a little bit about what Goodyear is doing in the mobility space. They're making advances in their tire technologies. And one of the interesting things that I was not aware of is that Goodyear is actually using soy oil rather than petroleum now in manufacturing the tread part of the tire. Tires have always been made from petroleum, but they've started using soy oil in a couple of different models of tires now for the tread part of it. So that's new. They're working on trying to make tires more sustainable. And they're also doing some interesting things with. They're doing some experimentation with having sensors that are actually built into the tire construction, but it's probably going to be a while before we start to see that in production. But what they are doing now is they're looking, because they understand how the tire functions. They are able to use some of the vehicle sensor data, things like wheel speeds and various other vehicle sensor data, in combination. They've developed algorithms in combination with what they know about how the tire actually works, to be able to provide back better feedback into other systems in the car about, for example, what the road conditions are, what the friction coefficient is between the tire and the road, so you can have better control over stability control systems, for example, or ABS. So they're doing a lot of interesting stuff that you wouldn't normally think of, for a tire maker. And one other note, I was just looking at the pictures of the new blimp online as you were speaking, Rebecca, and I think one of the reasons why the blimp is so quiet now is because it does have that structure. In the past, the blimps, the motors that propel the blimp forward were actually mounted on the gondola, which is the part underneath that you sit in. So they would have, it was always a lot louder. The new one, because it has that structure inside the balloon, they actually mount the motors, the propellers, up on the side of the balloon. So they're up and away from the gondola. So that would probably explain why it was so much quieter than you might have thought.
It was a very serene, really lovely experience, and just super cool. I mean, it was just amazing. And it was really fun because I went with my friend Tom, who has always wanted to go up in the blimp. And growing up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, like he did, he said that it used to come to some big agricultural fair there, EEI or something. I don't know what it is. And he was scheduled to go up in it as a teenager, and then the weather didn't cooperate. And so, 40 years later, he was able to go up in it. And so that was really, really, it was a lot of fun to see somebody so excited, as well as I was too. I mean, we all had a blast. And so it was, just one of those things that you see over sporting events and everything. And, there it was. The pilot did tell me, he said, a lot of times, he said, they're at the event and he goes, you just can't see anything because it's so far away. But they're also, it's tricky to fly that thing because it is gas. You're dealing with a natural element. You're dealing with the winds and the weather, and you've got to be really careful. There were some times when we kind of dipped and swayed and lurched a little bit. And so, I'm sure there's plenty of times when it's not nearly as serene as the ride that we had over Vegas.
Yeah, I wish my schedule had allowed for me to go on a ride in that thing too. I think that would have been a lot of fun. But I'm glad.
Well,
you got the opportunity to do it.
You can see my priorities because I ditched everything else to go on that thing.
Hey, look, you may not ever get another chance.
Right?
So
exactly. Yeah, from an automotive standpoint, I think Sony's car was the biggest surprise, Sam.
It's certainly nobody was expecting Sony to unveil a car during their press conference.
Well, so how much of a car, how much Sony is in that car versus how much Magna? Because I know that Magna partnered with them in the body design, and you look at the pictures of it, it shows real skill in how you form that metal and put it together. And I'm assuming that's Magna's expertise on display.
I would say so. Yeah. Magna, as an automotive supplier, and you spent quite a bit of time with them on Tuesday, I think, Rebecca.
Right. Yes.
As an automotive supplier, Magna makes just about anything that goes into cars, except for tires. Actually, that's one of the few things they don't make. And they do full vehicle production. They're among in addition to supplying parts and systems, they also have a contract manufacturing division called Magna Steyr in Austria, which builds vehicles for a number of known brands, like, for example, Jaguar, where they build the I-Pace there.
Or a little thing called the G-Wagon,
Yeah, they build the Mercedes G-Wagon. The
Supra.
The Toyota Supra and BMW,
and
the BMW Z4 are built there. The Aston Martin Rapide was built by Magna. So there, and many. They also build the BMW or the Mini Countryman and Paceman are built by Magna. So there's a huge array of vehicles that Magna builds now or has built
Porsche
in the past.
as well. They've the Boxster and the Cayman.
Yeah, they've done Boxster and Cayman production, as overflow for Porsche when they needed extra capacity. So, Magna, has partnerships with a wide variety of companies, and has often built concept cars for other manufacturers. And that's essentially what they did here. Sony wanted a platform that they could use to highlight some of the various things that they produce, such as audio systems, in-car audio systems, camera sensors that are used for surround view cameras, but also for driver assist systems, for forward collision warning and other systems, the displays, and a wide variety of other components. So as I understand it, Sony went to Magna and said, hey, we want a platform to show off all of the stuff that we can supply to the auto industry. And Magna basically built them a car that they could install their stuff in. So that's basically the Vision S. So I don't think that we will ever see a production Sony car. You never know. I mean, it's nothing's ever impossible in this business, but it's unlikely. It's mainly just something to showcase what Sony can do.
And what exactly is that? Like, what does Sony want to become more of an OEM? Do they want to be developing? Do they want to be more like Bosch?
I think more of a supply. Expand their presence in the supply base. So doing more displays, in vehicle displays,
well, and beyond stereo too.
Yeah,
beyond audio.
Right. Certainly doing more sensors. Camera sensors, especially. Sony, is widely considered to produce, some of the best camera sensors, imaging sensors, in the market. Most of the better smartphones on the market today use Sony sensors in them. All the iPhones have Sony imaging sensors in them. Most of the Samsung phones, the Google Pixels, all the best phones have Sony imaging sensors in them. So if you can leverage that technology to have better vision systems for cars, that's a big thing. And there's a variety of other components that Sony has the capability to manufacture as well.
Have either of you ever committed to a Sony device on a consumer level? You ever had that experience?
I've had a few over the years.
Yeah, I have too.
Sony's, and they do this on the pro level too. They make great stuff. It's usually well engineered. And that's about it. The support is terrible. And so I have this little it was a competitor to an iPod. It was a network Walkman NWHD5. And it's got a hard drive in it, and it sounds really good. The first iPods didn't sound that great, and me being a contrarian, I didn't want to buy into the Apple ecosystem with iTunes and everything. So the hardware device itself, great. Sony does great hardware. The software side of it, to like get stuff on and off of it, not great. And they stopped support for it. So basically you have this device that's kind of a brick now, because you have to go, look on SourceForge to find some program that you can use to load stuff on and off the little device that still works, and it works great. It's fantastic. But that's and on the pro video side, Sony has done that before too, where they've just like decided, you know what, we're not going to support that thing that you've built your $1 million facility around anymore. Yeah, we're done with that. So.
Well, unfortunately, that's all too common a problem, across the consumer electronics industry. If you aren't, the 800-pound gorilla in any market segment, chances are, if there's software support that's required for it, you're not going to get it. And that's, this is one of the things that, as cars become more software driven, that consumers need to think about, before they go buy a car from some upstart. Are they actually going to, if it depends on software, are they actually going to get that software? Are they going to get those updates over the life of the vehicle? And, that could be increasingly problematic.
Right. Are they free, or is there a fee? Are they free for the first owner? And what about the second owners, like consecutive owners? Like if you buy a laptop, for example, and then you sell it on Craigslist, well, how is that transfer of ownership handled? If it's a 2-year-old laptop and it still has a warranty or something, like all of those things they're open questions, I suppose. The car itself looked really cool though.
Yeah. No, it's a good looking car.
I wonder who designed it. That it would be interesting over the next few months to sort of undo the layers of that onion and see where exactly it came from. If we start to learn more, my guess is it's almost entirely from inside of Magna.
Yeah, my guess is that as well. And as Sam mentioned, I did work with them at CES and got some deep dives into some of their technology and some of their capabilities. It's really, I have to say, I think, Sam, you and I went back in October that we went to their showcase. Yeah. And the company continues to impress from a development standpoint, from a capabilities, technology. I mean, they really do touch almost every piece of the vehicle. And it was impressive.
They've wanted to be a car maker for a while, too.
Well, they are.
Well, no, but I mean, like they almost bought Saturn from GM.
Yeah, they did have an offer in to buy Saturn when GM was going through its bankruptcy process, but that deal fell through.
They operate in 28 different countries. I mean, they really do have quite a stem to stern or grill to trunk. What would be the right word? Sort of approach to bumper.
Yeah.
There you go, bumper to bumper.
Yeah. So one of the fun things that I worked with that we were showcasing was their powertrain capabilities. And they have this, when they come in and meet with a client or prospective client, they can actually, you tell them what your requirements are. So we want to build something for the Chinese market. And as soon as they put that into their system, then all the regulations that dictate the Chinese automotive market are automatically loaded. And then they have whether you want to have a all-wheel drive or what your driveline preferences are, what kind of, whether you want it to be a hybrid or not, and then also then you can have priorities of like eco is the most important thing with this engine, or dynamic, this level of fuel economy. So they have all these building blocks, and then they magically pop out this, what they would suggest based on your parameters. And it was just a really clever way of showing, again, like a very complex discussion, but in a very simple manner. And so they really were focusing at CES on making this company better, getting people to understand it better and getting people more familiar with what they supply. The other part that I saw, which they had touched on when we were out there, was the lighting systems. And they have these super, super thin LEDs that come on these strips. And basically anything that you can design, they can build it in lighting in terms of curly cues and shapes and like personalization, like on an electric vehicle where you don't need a grill, they can make that grill light up. And like for pedestrians, they can have it flash. So if they, if somebody's passing in front, like they can, or they sense somebody is there, they can actually have the grill light up and flash warning signs, lights, whatever, to help people, to help with pedestrian crossing and animals and stuff like that. And I thought that was really cool.
The lighting, that's a great jumping off point too. The other thing that we had on our list to talk about was the Audi AI Me, or AI. They always come up with these weird names. I'm not quite sure how to say it.
Amy was the way that they were saying it. Yeah.
Amy. Well,
not Amy, not Amy, what you gonna do, Amy, but something else.
Well, it's written like a ratio, so it's AI to ME.
Yeah.
Whatever.
AI to me.
Anyway, it has lights all over it too, because it's an autonomous vehicle, and one of the things that they're the idea is to engage pedestrians and users through the lighting system on the car. So that seemed pretty cool. It's a good idea. There's some thinking going on.
Yeah, I had a chance to go for a ride in it on Monday afternoon. Audi was doing some demo rides up on the roof of the parking garage at the Ariya Hotel. And so this is a concept that they showed last fall at the Frankfurt Motor Show. It's designed, as an urban mobility vehicle. So, it's a small 4-seater compact vehicle, and it's optionally autonomous, so you can drive it or not. When you switch from manual driving mode to autonomous, the wood shelf that sits above the instrument panel actually lifts up the whole steering column. The steering wheel folds down to a horizontal position, and then the steering wheel and column retract underneath, and then it lowers back down again. So you have no controls there. And it's a concept, so it's obviously far from complete, but it drove around in a pattern, on the roof of the parking garage. Interestingly, they put some QR codes up on the various light posts and things like that the cameras in the car used for localization to figure out where it was and to navigate around this parking garage. And then after driving around for a couple of minutes, then the Audi representative in the back seat handed Sean O'Kane from The Verge, who was in there with me, and I a pair of VR goggles that we put on. And, this is one of the ideas that's been talked about for autonomous cars is, you can sit back and, be in any kind of environment.
I am getting motion sickness just thinking about it.
Well, that was my thought too.
On.
But what they've done is they actually matched the environment that you see in the VR goggles to the motion of the car. So, as the vehicle moves, so as you're sitting still, you're not moving in the VR environment. You're standing still, and you can look around. But then as the car starts to move, you're actually moving through that VR environment at a corresponding speed. Similarly, as it turns and so on, you're turning. One of the issues with VR with motion sickness is that mismatch between the physiological feedback that you have from your environment, or the lack thereof, versus the motion that your eyes are seeing. And this is one of it's an evolutionary thing, where when what your body feels doesn't match what your eyes are seeing, that's what it's a reaction. We've evolved to assume that maybe we've eaten something that's poisonous, and that's what causes us to get nauseous and throw up.
The only thing I'm eating right now is ginger.
Ginger's supposed to help for that.
Yes, exactly.
But if the motion matches what your eyes are seeing, then you have a lot less of that. Now, there's no guarantee.
I would love to try this.
We were going at a very low speed.
I have to try this. Yes, but I mean, really, I have to try this because the motion sickness, just thinking about it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like using VR, when I'm standing still, because I have, I don't get motion sickness in cars or when I'm flying, but I have started to get a little nauseous at times when I'm using VR. So it does, I didn't have any issues with this one. So it was pretty interesting in that respect.
No, that sounds good. My mother used to tell us that she would get motion sickness when she would rock us in the rocking chair.
Oh, really?
So yes. So I come from a long line of motion sickness people, but I am able to control it with a variety of techniques. But I think that would be really interesting to try, because I do sometimes get a little nauseous even with ACC, like in the Toyota Highlander last year. So, but those are getting better, and so I'm sure that they're working on improving the experience of driving in a self-driving car.
Yeah, and that's actually an area where there is a lot of research being done with automated vehicles, is the connection between motion sickness, because you're actually you're a lot more likely to get motion sickness in a car when you're not driving than when you are, when you're not in control of the situation.
For sure.
And so that is a concern with AVs, is, riders in these things, especially if you've got vehicles that have non-traditional seating arrangements, where you've got lounge seating around the inside of a shuttle or something like that. The likelihood of getting motion sickness is a lot higher. So they're working on how to mitigate that.
Well, if any of our listeners are involved in that kind of testing, I am willing to volunteer.
Just bring your barf bags.
Exactly.
The idea to me is just like, you could do like a curated tour. You could do like, it wouldn't have to be VR though. It could just be like the audio system. Like the car could drive you around and be like, look, kids, Big Ben, Parliament. And like, could have like a, anyway.
I will say the other thing that we saw that I got to test drive at CES was from Nissan.
Yes, I was going there next. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it was what they call E-Force, and an F instead of an F, it's a 4. So annoying.
I can, because of the Star Wars tie-ins, I heard that immediately, and I was like, oh, they're going to do an ad where it's like use E-Force, and yeah. But anyway,
use the E-Force.
Yeah.
But you know what? So it's basically Nissan's version of torque vectoring, and they put it on. In this case, I think Sam described it best earlier before we went on the air. It was put on the Leaf as a test mule, but it is going to be coming out on the Ariya that they showed at CES, which I thought was a beautiful looking vehicle inside and out. So that was really pretty cool. But basically what the C-Force does is, it helps with traction. It helps with performance. And it certainly helped with, speaking of car sickness, reduced body motion for sure. I mean, I went around 9 times on this very tight, short track and in a donut configuration, basically. And I was only driving for 3 of those laps. And I was really surprised that I did not get motion sickness at all because I have been known to. But it was pretty cool, and I think that it does a good job of keeping the car much flatter on acceleration, braking, cornering. It was really good. I think they did a really nice job on it.
Why were they so resistant to the idea of a Leaf with this, though? Like for years, they'd said, like, yeah, we're not doing a 2-motor Leaf. Is it just because they don't want to set that expectation?
I suspect it's a packaging issue. Just with the size of the Leaf. They probably my guess is that this development mule that you're driving probably had a smaller than normal battery size for a Leaf in order to fit the that rear motor in there. And it's that. So I would guess it's all about packaging because the Ariya, the production version of the Ariya. So they showed the Ariya concept, I think, at the Tokyo Auto Show last fall. Right. And they also had it on display here at CES. It's kind of a rogue-sized crossover, and this is going to be Nissan's next EV. I had a chance to talk to Takeo Asami about where they're going, and so Nissan is really for plug-in vehicles. They're focused they're all in on EVs, and they're not really pursuing power split, what we call power split hybrids, the Toyota style hybrids anymore. Going forward, you're going to have basically battery electric vehicles and their e-power system, which is a series hybrid, which they've had in Japan for several years now on a couple of different models. And that's going to be coming here by next year as well. I think the Ariya, the production Ariya, is also it's probably going to be a 2021 model. But we'll see that.
Yeah, I think it's 2021 as well.
Yeah, I think we'll probably see the production version maybe at the LA Auto Show this year, and then going into production next year.
Yeah, it was great though. I mean, I think that it definitely provided a nice sense of stability to this vehicle, and I think that that's something that's important. People often, that's one of the complaints about crossovers, right? Even almost regardless of size, is that you have that higher center of gravity, and this definitely gave it some nice weight, and it does weigh almost 200 pounds more with the system in, so that will definitely change some of the dynamics of it. But it was cool. I'm glad they gave us the opportunity to to test it out. And unfortunately, the test overall, our group was only able to do the constant radius test. We did do the acceleration one though, which was pretty good, but it was almost like a casual quick thing. But it was, it was cool to try it out and to do that 2-motor prototype. So that was neat. I liked it.
We're never going to see a production version of
what?
The Mercedes-Benz AVTR, whatever nonsense. That thing, but buried in there is the fact that they have a graphene battery. And so that seems like the most important news there is that battery tech is something they're tinkering with. And we may see production graphene batteries at some point soon.
Yeah. I mean, there's already graphite in batteries today, as part of the chemistry in there. And so I think it's a safe bet that at some point in the next probably 5 to 10 years, we will see graphene in batteries. And for those that aren't familiar with it, graphite, graphene, they are all various molecular forms of carbon. Graphite has a crystalline structure. It's a 3-dimensional crystalline structure. The distinction with graphene is its crystal structure is actually flat. So you can get layers, single atomic layers, that it's a flat structure that has some very unique properties, and it's also very highly conductive, both heat conductive and electricity conductive.
Yeah, and it's recyclable. It's not. That's one of the big issues with batteries right now is that it's hard to fully recycle a battery, and so that's the claim to fame right now for graphene batteries is that they're fully recyclable. And it may not be the breakthrough that we want, the Holy Grail, right? The incredible range, the fast charging, the non-environmentally hazardous kind of thing. I don't know that you're ever going to get there with batteries, but I'm really interested in this different approach. Or the rest of the AVTR was, I couldn't wrap my head around it. Like the thing that, so it's like tech for tech's sake, right? It projects stuff into your hand, and then you make selections there. Like a lot of times when it's like these displays of tech, right? It's like people just poking at things in thin air, and then we like project little buttons and stuff there. Like that interface seems crappy to me. I don't know why that's like.
I didn't understand anything in the Mercedes booth.
So just for a little background, the name of this thing, this concept was actually supposedly inspired by the movie Avatar, and they worked with James Cameron and his crew on this thing, because Cameron has apparently been working on like 4 sequels to Avatar for the last decade.
Yeah, the best thing about James Cameron is that his ex-wife has kicked his ass for Oscars.
Who's his ex-wife?
Catherine Bigelow.
Catherine Bigelow, that's it. So I think that this CES, though, unfortunately, I didn't get to see nearly as much as I wanted to, but I do think that, we continue to see that marriage between automotive, mobility, technology. And it was funny because somebody posted something on Twitter before we left about like, are automakers going to CES really still? And I didn't understand that. I was like, what are you talking about? If you don't go, like, I don't know. I just, and
they're
others,
the biggest piece of consumer electronics everybody owns.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
That, a lot of automakers don't go to CES. And in fact, some automakers that have in the past didn't go this year.
Right. But next year, there's going to be a separate, I think building 6 that they're building now is all automotive. And so GM is coming back. I've heard other people, we're going to get our own hall, which there's pros and cons, of course, but it's certainly a whole lot of more room. And there's a bridge that connects all the other halls. So CES is certainly making a commitment to automotive, and with brands like Audi pulling out of New York, again, we're really starting to see a lot of disruption in in that show space.
Well, so from my perspective, as a journalist who has sometimes covered shows, I'm like the occasional journalist. You guys are doing much harder, more diligent work at it than I am. But it takes its toll on you folks. Like, it's just brutal to be flying around all the time. And then your coverage is maybe wide, but it's shallow necessarily because you're only seeing what they want you to see in that sense. You don't get to handle the thing. It's like a launch event for an automaker. Same kind of thing. Like you get flown in, you get the company line, and you get to drive it around on this predetermined route. It shows it off in its best light. And I get it. Like sometimes that it's like you want control of your messaging. But it's somewhat less meaningful, I think, coverage in a lot of ways. Like being there and being able to talk to the people is super valuable. Like getting the interviews, that's all great. But like showing their press releases, like or their press conferences is I don't know. I guess it all goes together. I don't have a great solution for it, but I think that the show space is of maybe of limited value, or the value is shifting to other venues or other private events that they can really control versus being among the noise of something like CES, where it's just a huge show.
Yeah. And it's the investment. I mean, they make, the amount of money that they are charged to participate in these shows is outrageous. And really they look at it and say, what's our ROI?
Right. And, the thing that's always been different about CES, a lot of people have blamed CES for the decline of auto shows. And I don't think that that's actually fair because, auto shows have always been the place where manufacturers have shown off their new products that are going on sale this year or maybe next year, but it's near term real products, and it's the place, on the show floor where you see all the stuff that they are selling today. It's where consumers can go and see, Ford and Volvo and Volkswagen and all these other brands in one place at one time. That said, this year, CES has never been about that. It's never been about a place about selling products. And with a couple of very rare exceptions, it's never been a place where manufacturers have shown off, their new product that's coming to market in the near term. It's always been about looking at future looking technology and ideas, silly things like, the Hyundai SA-1, and the Mercedes-Benz AVTR, things that are way far out there, but for the traditional trade shows, the auto shows, manufacturers have been pulling out of there because, as you said, they haven't been getting that return on investment, from doing the media events there, because as with CES and any other trade show, when everybody in your industry is there, now you're fighting, for attention to get that 15 minutes of media attention for the day, and what they want is to be able to get an entire news cycle. And so they're increasingly doing events separate from auto shows. Like, for example, GM showed the new Suburban and Tahoe last month here in Detroit, at the Joe Louis or the Little Caesars Arena. They did the debut there. Next month, or next week, GMC is going to show off their version of it, the Tahoe in Vail, and then next month, Cadillac is going to show off the Escalade in Hollywood. It's doing these standalone events. They can get much more attention for that without battling everybody else for the news cycle.
Yeah, it makes sense from their perspective. I mean, it's just a business perspective. It's a shift. The only constant is change.
Yep.
Exactly.
And at some point, we may see them go back to doing auto shows more again. But for example, at CES this year, although GM actually was planning to exhibit at CES this year, they were going to make an announcement about that was apparently had to do with their electric truck program.
That's right.
But the vehicle that they were planning, the concept vehicle they were planning to show off, apparently construction of that vehicle got delayed during the fall because of the strike. And so they weren't ready. So they pulled out. But, other manufacturers that have been there in past years, like Volkswagen, was not there this year, and, somebody, I think on Twitter or somewhere, somebody pinged me to ask if Volvo was at CES. And Volvo has never gone to CES. And in fact, now they're not even doing traditional auto shows anymore. So, this is just an overall trend. And it's not just in the auto industry, even, in other industries, trade shows are suffering because companies, just as, Apple used to do, annual events or annual unveilings at Macworld Expo in San Francisco. That's where they unveiled the iPhone and the original iPad. They stopped going to Macworld Expo, and now Macworld Expo is gone. And it goes in other industries as well.
I'm not that alarmed by it. I think that messages will keep getting out, and the less we fly around, the better.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan Gitlin from Ars Technica had a really good tweet about this yesterday. He's committing to no longer go fly to events where all they're going to do is show off the new vehicle. If you don't get to at least drive it, he's not even going to bother going.
Yeah, I still think the best way to get honest coverage of the cars is, put them in regional fleets or do small regional events. The small regional event sort of gets you back to some of the issues with investment. It's probably more expensive to do it that way because you're splitting it up and you're sending people in cars in multiple places, versus having all of the people come to you in one place over a condensed period of time. So there's some thinking to do.
I think the regional drives are actually still cheaper than doing, multiple waves, coming to one venue, because they're usually at, lower cost venues,
Yeah, that's
for
true.
example, Hyundai, this week they're doing the media drives for the venue in Miami, but they also do regional drives at various locations around the country, like including here, in the Ann Arbor area where they have their tech center, and they just do the drive programs and the events right from their tech center. So they don't have to pay any rent for anything like that. They just have to put the cars on a truck and ship them somewhere.
Yeah. So, hey, we got totally off topic.
Yeah.
all
there
part of the
anything-
discussion.
Yeah, that's true. We had a couple of other things on the list. We're getting out towards about an hour and a half. But Sam, you got to drive, or not drive. You got to ride in the Yandex automated vehicle, which, that's gotta. So Yandex, if people don't know, like they're like the Russian Google, right? Like
Pretty much, yeah. They started off as a Russian search engine company, very much like Google. A few years ago, they launched Yandex Taxi, which is their ride-hailing service. Very much like Uber, Lyft, Didi, and they operate that in Russia and 17 other countries. And in 2017, they launched their own automated driving program, much like Google. And there's a lot of good software engineers in Russia. And they've made some pretty rapid progress with this program. They actually came to CES last year. I wasn't able to connect with them last year, but I did get to go for a ride in one of their cars this year. Excuse me. And they had two cars there this year. And of all the rides I've taken, my very first trip to CES was in 2008 when I went with GM to go check out the Chevy Tahoe that won the DARPA Urban Challenge in 2007. And I went for a ride in that thing. That was in a course set up in one of the parking lots at the convention center. And it was driverless. There was no safety driver in there because there was no room for a safety driver with all the equipment they had in there. I was the only one in the vehicle, except for one person, one technician in the back. But this was the first, and I've taken other rides without safety drivers on test tracks. This is the first time I've been out on public roads without a safety driver. So, cruising around, about a 4-mile loop around southeast side of Las Vegas from the Hard Rock Cafe. It was about a 15-minute ride, and there was I was sitting in the right rear seat, nobody in front of me behind the steering wheel. There was one operator on the front passenger seat with his hand hovering near the kill switch. So if anything went wrong, he could just hit the big red button and stop everything. But
that's comforting.
Yeah. But, it was a surprisingly good ride. Interestingly, this past week while I was in Vegas, I also had 4 rides in Aptiv's automated vehicles on the Lyft network, just through the Lyft app. They have 30 cars that are running, 30 automated cars that are running on the Lyft app.
I'm so bummed I never got to. There was never one available when I tried. I was super bummed.
I managed to score 4 rides in them.
It's awesome because you were in them. You
yeah.
selfish SOB. Yeah. Sorry.
Anyway, those have, a safety driver in the front passenger seat and another operator in the front, or safety driver in the driver's seat, operator in the passenger seat. The one in the passenger seat was there to keep an eye on things, answer questions for passengers, help educate people about the self-driving capabilities. And those cars, as I said, one of the things about those cars is in Nevada, you can get a permit from the state to operate on public roads, but on private property, like for example, hotel parking lots or valet areas or parking garages, you have to get a permit from each one of those, the owners of that property, in order to use it. And Aptiv hasn't gone through that process of getting permits from every single property owner in, on the Las Vegas Strip and in downtown Las Vegas where they operate. Because Yandex was only going from this one venue, they did get permission both from the state to operate driverless and also from the Hard Rock Hotel, to operate in the garage. So right from the get-go, pulling out of the parking garage at the Hard Rock, there was nobody there, and it just cruised right out. And the car actually was surprisingly aggressive in its driving style, which they explained to me, it was originally tuned to operate in Russia and then later in Tel Aviv, where they also do testing. The drivers are, perhaps a little more aggressive, let's say.
Yeah,
than
definitely
than what we are mostly here. And so, in order to survive in that environment, the car has to drive a little more aggressively. So it accelerated harder coming out of the parking garage. When it went to make lane changes, it was a little quicker to switch lanes than the Aptiv cars were. In one of my rides in the Aptiv car, it was it started to switch lanes as it was approaching our destination, and it saw a car coming up from behind in that lane at a faster speed than it was comfortable with, so it pulled back into the lane it was in till that car passed. Then it did the lane change. Whereas a lot of human drivers would have just said, I'm just going to assume that he's going to slow down or pull over to the other lane, and completed that lane change. The Aptiv car is much more conservative in its approach, and they're biased towards safety, because they're operating in a high traffic environment on the strip. The Yandex car, the loop we were on, it was early in the morning. There was very little traffic on those roads, on the roads that they chose. So there were no real challenges to it. It didn't do any unprotected left turns, things like that. So it worked, but it's hard to judge in that particular operating environment. Hopefully at some point I'll get a chance to evaluate it. They're going to be back here in Detroit in June during the auto show, which is moving to June this year. One of the things that's going to be going on, because we'll have better weather in June than we do in January, there's going to be a number of AV companies that are operating rides around the downtown Detroit area, and Yandex is one of those companies. So I'll be curious to get back into it here, and see how it behaves, in a little more high traffic environment.
Should be a good time.
Yeah.
In Detroit, it's going to have to. You know what they should do? They should bring it to Woodward. Do the Dream Cruise. Although the Dream Cruise is
that's actually pretty
driving.
easy, because you're just going in a straight line, and it's basically all you need there is adaptive cruise control and lane centering. One last item I want to mention: the Hyundai SA-1.
Oh, come on!
Did you go look at this thing, Rebecca?
The what?
The Hyundai SA-1.
The airplane.
Oh,
the air taxi.
Airplane.
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
Yes, I agree.
Like,
This whole urban air mobility thing.
It was a huge. I mean, it was full scale.
Yeah.
But it reminded me of something in the 40s, like designed in the 40s, and it's an aircraft. I mean,
these are not flying cars.
Don't even get me started, because we have put together a solid podcast. But one of the things that we need to do is stop calling people perceive as new things that already exist. For instance, a shared ride is a carpool.
Or a taxi.
We already have that.
Yes.
Yeah.
This was what Hyundai showed, and I didn't get a lot of details, but just visually, I looked at that and thought, that is an airplane. It's not a flying car.
Oh, it's a cross between an airplane and a helicopter.
We have both of those already.
Yes.
It's a large scale drone. It's vertical.
We have those as well.
Except
absolutely.
It's not even autonomous. It has a pilot.
I didn't understand it, and I didn't have time, unfortunately, to indulge them.
I went to the press conference and also a Q&A afterwards. This is something that's not coming until 2030 anyway. So I just had to mention it, but I don't think there's anything else that needs to be said, except don't plan on, using any of these kinds of eVTOL aircraft anytime soon.
You know what's going to be really inefficient? Commuting in aircraft.
Oh yes.
Like,
at least it's electric.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool. No, so the amount of space it takes up, right? It's got that wingspan that would be it can take off and land vertically. That's cool. It doesn't need a runway in that sense, but it's still like it's a large physical footprint just for the wings and the motors, and it's got 5 motors. And then you look at the passenger compartment, or it's tiny.
It's got room for 4 passengers plus a pilot.
I mean, come on. That's like putting wings on a Ford Escort and flying it around. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think these kind of things, and especially like 2030, between now and 2030, anything could happen. I think we're better off making electrified transit a thing. And even if you're stringing catenaries around certain municipalities instead of like straight EVs, like just figure out a way to power this stuff with electricity and get it out there. And
totally agree.
Yeah. So, and I saw there was interesting interesting little sort of side thread. Like, why are so many car riders fans of transit? It's because we like to drive, and so y'all are in our way. Okay?
Exactly. I love that. I saw that too. That was awesome.
But also, you can like cars and driving, and also want to make sure that we preserve the ecology and don't destroy our environment with fossil fuels. Like, those are two things that can exist.
Well, that, and the more you like to drive, the less likely you are to actually enjoy a commute.
Yes.
So, I mean, when I was commuting to a job outside of my home, I would have much rather had the option to take a bus or a train to get to Dearborn or Detroit or Livonia than, to drive there every day.
Sitting in traffic.
It's not fun. I take my Miata to go out and drive in the countryside, to have some fun. That's not something, you do on a daily basis, commuting to work. So, having a good transit system, I think, is much more valuable because it does make the other stuff more enjoyable.
That, and, it's the industry we cover, right? We are attuned to the emissions and economies of what we're doing, more so than just people who just do it because it's what you have to do. And then the impact on all of the other sectors of the population. Like, yeah, it's great. Uber and stuff exists as a shadow public transit system for people who can afford it. Like, where does that leave all the people who can't afford it, who are unbanked, so this is our industry. We should know these things. We should cover that. And by covering it, we wind up with opinions. And I think a lot of us wind up really enthusiastic about transit because it's a good way to move around, even though we enjoy driving ourselves,
Exactly.
All right. That's it. I'm getting off the soapbox. We're gonna.
All right. Just one more note. While I was at CES on Tuesday afternoon, I spent a couple hours with Leo Laporte and Ant Pruitt from the Twit Podcast Network, and we recorded several videos of some cool automotive technology there. And I will include a link to that in the show notes.
Oh, definitely, yes. Anytime that those guys, anytime you have something to share from what you're doing with those guys, we should make sure that we're letting everybody on Wheel Bearings know. So.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me on this lovely windy Sunday, and we'll catch everybody later on.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Wheel Bearings. Find us at wheelbearings.media and on Twitter as @WheelBearingsCast. Remember, there's only one vowel. That's the A in cast. We're also at Car Review Tweets on Twitter, or you could just email us. That's feedback@wheelbearings.media.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.